It's Monday today on my planet, so that means it's time to look at some happy animals while listening to a robot talk about word origins. First up is Murky. Our word murky, or rather murk, came to us from the Vikings, who brought their Old Norse word mörker, signifying something dark or cheerless. Considering what the Vikings were generally up to back then, this seems rather appropriate. Old Norse's mörker, in turn, came from Proto-Germanic mörkio, meaning darkness. After the Vikings spread peace and love about the countryside, the word developed over time into forms such as mirs in Old English, murky in Old Saxon, and later came to be used as an adjective in Middle English. The first written record of the word murky is found in a Middle English sermon from the early 13th century. So there you go, murky came from Proto-Germanic by way of the Vikings, and a 13th century priest used it to complain about how dark his cloister was. Now let's think about brain. As happens with many English words that have been around for a while, it lost a syllable and underwent what linguists refer to as vowel shenanigans. Brain comes to modern English from the Old English word bragen. Old English in turn got it from Proto-Germanic bragnan. Here's a fun fact. Do you know what bragen loca meant in Old English? Turns out it meant head, or literally brain locker. Anyhow, brain made its first recorded appearance in English literature in the late 14th century in a manuscript named The Voyage and Travail of Sir John Maundeville. The modern title is Mandeville's Travels, which tells a story about a journey through the Islamic world and to India. I'm sure it's a fascinating read and contains nothing problematic at all, so bragen became the modern English brain, keeping its meaning pretty much the same. You might ask, though, how did it lose its extra syllable? That brings us to conjecture time. Consider the vowel in the first syllable, bray. It's pretty common for vowels, and especially diphthongs, or pairs of conjoined vowels, to get up to no good. In this case, going from the old brari to modern bray involves speakers just putting their tongues a bit more to the front at the end. Going further along the conjecture highway, the forward movement of the tongue could have been enabled by the weakening of the hard G sound in the second syllable of bragen. And there were probably transitional forms where the G would have been pronounced more like a fricative, like saying again, but when you're really drunk. So the G sound probably weakened and eventually stopped being pronounced entirely, making it easier for the vowel to shift to where it is nowadays. And since people couldn't spell for shit back then, they wouldn't have noticed that the G was ever even there. Well, having flexed on you with that slice of student loan-funded nonsense, let's top it off with custard. Where does that word come from? It comes from the Middle English term Custard, meaning a type of pie with a crust. In other words, not the creamy sweet goo that we associate the word with now, but rather the overall creamy sweet goo delivery vehicle as a whole. The first attestation of the word custard in English literature dates back to the 14th century in a collection of recipes known as the Form of Cury. But how did a word that was once associated with a pie evolve to represent a dessert with a silky texture? It's a story that takes us back to centuries-old kitchens, where pie fillings began to take a life of their own, separate from their crusty encasements. Over time, these fillings became smoother and creamier, evolving into the custard we know and love today. That is to say, people just shifted the meaning from the container to the contents, and eventually honed the meaning of the contents to what we have today. It probably happened sometime shortly after they decided to throw that original R in the bin. Poor R's. Well, that's it for today. I hope you have a delightful week. Drop a comment if you'd like to hear more about how sounds change in words that have hung around the language for a while. Bye for now.